Welcome to the show, Robert Masters.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, good to have you back. Listeners, Robert was in episode 7 way back in the day. Make sure you check that out. It was the 4 steps to intimacy or something like that. It was great. Anyway, I'm really grateful to get a little time with you, Robert. I know you're busy. You're writing a lot, teaching a lot. And specifically, I reached out to you because I want to talk about spiritual bypassing, because I think this conversation continues to be extremely relevant. And we'll dive in. First of all, before we do that, I had just a total non sequitur question, because you've written so many books and you're creative, you're a poet, you're an artist. Can you give us like a sense of your creative process? Like, how do you write so many books? What is the discipline like? I don't know. What does it look like?
Well, the beginning, there's no discipline. It's just like a download. I had the spiritual bypassing. I was on the coast with Diane taking a break. I spent 2 days just writing like crazy, like 30 or 40 pages on the topic. People had said, no one's done a book on this. Why don't you do a book? I thought, well, okay. So after a couple of days, I had this pile of papers. It was chaotic. It was wild. And I pulled out of that spiritual bypassing, the essence of the book. So the first step for me being creative is to let it flow. The inner critic is not allowed in the room. I'm just writing. I have what psychologists would call thought disorder, because I write very creatively, it's poetic. Then the hard work began with having a really tough editor, a good editor from North Atlantic Books on my case for months around it. And I was a little stubborn at first. I thought, this is a brilliant fucking passage. How can you not accept it? They said, well, and they were right. So that's how I've written the books, all the ones been published outside of self-published, which is a long time ago. Just letting it pour forth and having a sense of me not so much doing it, and also not trying to be some sort of channel for it. It just pours through. I love doing it. I love working with people. Mm-hmm. It's in my blood. It's natural to me. It's not like a labor usually. The writing is like, it's a pleasure, but it's a little disordered in a way, the writing at first, because I don't care about order. Maybe the first sentence is halfway through the essay, but it works out in the long run.
Yeah, it's amazing. I just finished my first book, and it was a big deal. And I thought the hardest part was actually editing it down, because I was like, no, it's all good. And I a little arrogant, but I realized like the delete button is actually really important, and having a good editor. So I'm with you on that. Do you feel like you have to step away from your life to write a book, or do you just do it in the midst of your life?
I did it in the midst of all my work, all the books. And I found that harder and harder, because doing my work is lovely, but at the end of the time, I want to just wind down. Usually don't want to write anything disciplined. I want to go for a workout, meditate, just hang out with Diane, watch a movie. So I've had to blend the two. And what I did for the last one, though, I took big chunks of time off so I could write, like 2 or 3 weeks, I'd write. Because if I get writing in a groove, I don't like to break it with work. Totally. I can do it, but it's just like all my energy's into the book. Yep. And as I get older, I'm 73 now. It's harder to devote myself to both. So right now, I'm just working full time. I'll take a month off in the summer. Maybe I'll write something, but there's that sense of balance.
Right.
And I'm sure you find when you're in a groove, so you're doing not just the sessions, but you're leading a group or some sort of training. I mean, when I have breaks from it, I just want to basically do nothing. Go for a long run or hike. And then I come back in, I face the group. It's all on Zoom now. So it's just like I'm on the computer so much.
Well, maybe you have some advice for me here, because I tend I work. I'm just learning this. I feel like slow learner here, that I write best when I'm in my body, in my heart, more resourced, versus when I'm stressed out and in my head, kind of solving all the problems inside the business. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious how you would counsel me there. Like, obviously, okay, go spend more time in nature or do whatever, but
I'd say when you're writing, though, don't interrupt it to take emails or put out small fires. Something big, of course, you have to break, but you want to stay with it. I find if I have 2 full hours and staying with the writing, I get so much done. Then I want to take a break from the writing.
Yeah, cool. Yep. It's like titrating, right?
So my schedule. I don't have it this laid out where I'm working all the time. I say, okay, here's these 3 days this week. I'm working. All I'm doing is working. Here's 2 days off. I've scheduled myself more and more, and I've learned to take breaks after groups. I used to work right after the group. Diane said, "Oh no," she said, "You do a 3-day group, 3 days off. A week-long group, take a week off." So I've been doing that. It's great.
Nice. Okay, good.
That's my own devices. I'd probably be burned out by now. I just would keep plugging in. Oh, I want a session. I need a session. Can I be in this group? And I want to. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
We have an admin who handles all the paperwork and stuff for me, but still, it's a lot of labor.
Totally.
The easiest part is in front of the person or the group, or I'm on screen with them on Zoom, and I just have to sit down and just go. I love that. That's the simple part.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that. That was helpful for me.
Also, giving your wife permission to interrupt you and say, "Hey, like Diane will come in here and see the smoke coming out of my ears when I'm writing. Take a fucking break.
Chill out.
Thank you. No resistance here."
Nice. It's hard, right? For me anyway. Yes, I can relate. Cool. Robert, why did you write this book? I know it's been a few years, but I'm just curious why you wrote this book, Spiritual Bypassing.
Well, simply put, it was needed. But I had seen evidence of spiritual bypassing since the late 80s. West Coast, California, Boulder, Hawaii, different little hotbeds of it. And I'd never thought of writing about it till a guy in Ashton said, "There's no book on this." Because a chapter by John Welwood somewhere, but why don't you do a book? You're a good writer. You know the territory.
Yeah.
So I took it on. And as I did it, one thing that came clear to me is initially I was writing it about people who spiritually bypassed. I left myself out of it. And I thought, come on, Robert, you've had your head up your rear end doing that. We've all done it. Any of us on a spiritual path have done it, and probably still have some tendencies. Like the stuff on blind compassion in the book. I also have a chapter on that in my book on relationship. It fits, and I see more and more of a need to know it really well. It's not just something to do with pure spirituality. It's to do with everything: sexuality, shame, anger, feeling.
Totally. Yeah, Trump called that
I call it dissociation in holy robes. That's one way I would look at it. Like it's dissociation. It's avoidance.
So let's get into what is spiritual bypassing in like the short summary, because you write a whole book about it.
It's the use of spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with relationship hassles, emotional challenges, developmental tasks. It's avoidance.
Yeah.
All dressed up to look all spiritual and good.
Yep.
The spiritual bypasser in us loves the light and can't stand the heat. And fire, of course, is heat and light. So if you want the real light, you got to face the fire too.
Totally. I love that part of your book in the intro. You're, so give us like a story or a classic example of spiritual bypassing. Again, it could be about someone famous or just a client of yours over the years or yourself. But I'm just curious if you have like a vignette to share with us about where this could show up.
There's so many. I mean, I'll take what I call blind compassion, where we're is confrontation phobic, it's anger phobic. It's nice. So if you've hurt me in some way, you've offended me, and you've actually done a little harm. If I'm a spiritual bypasser caught in blind compassion, I'm going to make excuses for you. I'm going to let you off the hook. Mm-hmm. I will never show you my anger, because that's not spiritual. And I won't confront, because in my early history, confrontation was associated with a lack of love or danger. So I have all these reasons, but I will frame it as something very spiritual.
Right.
And that's appallingly common to excuse those who have actually done something they need to apologize for or clean up.
Yeah, it's like no boundaries, right?
Yeah. Or in a relationship, it's a type of codependence.
Yeah.
One person can do all the shit, and the other person just puts up with it, makes excuses, and will be unhappy with anyone who challenges that quality in their relationship.
Totally.
And see, even in that, there's a second category. Here's anger being looked upon as an affliction, as something unwholesome. Like a lot of Buddhist thought has that as a central tenet of their teachings. And they mistakenly equate anger with ill will, hatred, aggression, etc.
Yeah. I remember that when I was a practicing Buddhist for many years, and I got a little hung up on the anger teaching. I don't know, was it the Eightfold Path? Or I can't remember which part of Buddhism talks about anger is kind of bad.
Well, it covers a lot. Like one famous teacher said, one moment of anger will destroy 1,000 eons of merit. I mean, it's like, okay, this sounds pretty fucking heavy. Who can take that? Everyone gets angry, even those. I mean, I've seen spiritual teachers that claim to have no anger, and I've seen them in private sometimes, looking both ways and kicking the dog
Oh,
or
yeah,
speaking harshly to an assistant. Like, it's part of
absolutely.
our equipment.
Yeah, it's part of how we're
I
built,
could
right?
be way further along the path, developmental path, and we're still going to get pissed off. We're still going to be angry.
Yeah. Who's what's a, I mean, it seems like every year there's another spiritual teacher that goes down because they were a human being.
Yeah.
Why is that such a trap? I mean, a lot of us equate spiritual, because you're talking about very practical daily terms in all of us, which
Yeah.
is helpful. I want to come back to that. And a lot of us think spiritual bypassing is like a spiritual teacher who is like, yeah, angry behind the scenes or sleeping with their students or something like that. Can you talk about like the spiritual teacher, spiritual bypassing?
The one I just mentioned?
Or just anyone, like,
Well, I think
a lot of people think of spiritual bypassers as either students of a teacher, a famous teacher, or a teacher themselves who
if the teacher's
goes down, gets in trouble.
that demonizes anger, then they get something out of following that by making their own anger seemingly non-existent, like it shouldn't be here.
Right.
So I won't show it all. I'll just show myself sitting meditatively in front of people. I'll be giving wise discourses, but my behind the scenes behaviors, this goes unexamined.
Yeah.
Or my shaming of students for not measuring up, which is a type of aggression. Many teachers fall into that trap. So if you're a student in that path and you're not doing too well, and you tell me that, and I'm the teacher, I'll say, well, Jayson, you should be, how's your meditation practice? Maybe we can double it for a while. Maybe you should apply yourself a little harder. And inadvertently, I'm shaming you for not doing better. I'm making you feel smaller. And I'm the authority. And I, of course, can show no weakness. It's a major problem.
How would a teacher, a spiritual teacher in that example do that better or do that differently?
Do some therapy. Get their ass off the Zoff and into the therapy chambers. Do some work on themselves.
Yeah. But if they have like
after I wrote Spiritual Bypass, I had a number of spiritual teachers contact me privately and thank me for it and say with some embarrassment, they know they have that going in themselves.
Yeah.
And that's just the ones who are willing to say that.
Right. And there's a lot that aren't.
Yeah.
So you're saying, in a way it's hypocrisy. It's like a parent almost who tells their kids to, do as I say, not do as I do, right? Behind the scenes they're, hey, you shouldn't.
Don't get angry at me. Don't get angry, but of course they themselves have their own permission to be angry. So there's just a double standard for the kid.
Can we unpack why this behavior happens in, say, a mentor, guide, a teacher, a spiritual teacher? Because I see that with myself. I coach students. I have students.
Power.
What's that?
It's to do with power. Like it's tempting as a teacher or guide, or especially ones that are on supposedly a higher level, to have a certain authority, have a certain power. And there's a natural authority a really good teacher has, but that doesn't mean they have to lord it over the others.
Right.
Like in the sense the captain of the boat is no more special than the deckhand. Both are needed. The captain's needed, but too often the captain role will assume too much. We know we is power. And then people around don't want to offend. Like the sycophants who are around Trump didn't want to step on his toes because they could lose something, et cetera. And so it runs through our entire culture. It's to do with instead of sharing power, it's about one person overpowering the other. And the one who gets overpowered gets a bit of a payoff. Maybe they get more protection or something from the bully.
Yeah. So let's unpack this a little more. So let's say, I'll just speak about myself, use me as an example. Sometimes I feel projections coming at me that are positive, right? Mm-hmm. So, Jason's such a great guy. He's so good at relationship, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And so I might, if I'm not careful, I might agree with that projection, be like, yeah, I'm so good. And so then when I have a problem in my marriage, I might not talk about it because I want to keep buying into this role that I'm so good at relationship.
Yes.
Right? Is that kind of like what we're talking about here?
Yes.
The seduction of that.
There's a payoff for you and having been in that position, and that payoff is what's in the shadows because it's not being exposed.
Totally. And then it will get exposed because I'll make some mess or I'll have a fight with my wife, and then it feels so bad to be a fraud if I'm pretending to be one thing and not another. right? So I'll create some drama to get me to wake up out of this kind of illusion that I've got my shit together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's an evolutionary thing at work here, because that means as we get older, we don't claim, okay, now I'm beyond that. Like I still get reactive.
Oh,
I knew how to work with it 40 years ago. I still do. I'm very quick at getting through it, but it still happens.
absolutely.
It's just that I'm much more transparent. I can get it really quickly. If I don't catch first, Diane has incredibly clear eye from me. She can see it.
Yeah.
And there's less and less concern or shame around that, because that's part of growing.
Yeah.
And that's where really high quality psychotherapy is really important. A lot of people who are guiding others have not had any of it, including the medical profession. The people I've seen who have been very screwed up, for example, I've seen psychiatrists for work, and they most basically self-medicating, not having done any work on themselves during their psychiatric training is something. I mean, can you imagine going to your work having had no experience being in a men's group, or having uncomfortable therapeutic encounters, meetings, breakthroughs?
Oh, totally.
You couldn't do what you're doing. You couldn't.
No, it'd be impossible. There'd be what I call coach entanglement or countertransference all the time, right? That I'd be acting out around,
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about developmental work, because I think this is a huge, I don't know, trap in spiritual practitioners. Is
You know where it shows up most clearly, perhaps, is in the parent-child transference stuff that goes on between teacher and student. Teacher plays their role, and student, theirs is to be the obedient, well-behaved child. And
Yeah.
they get more payoffs for doing that. That plagues most spiritual communities, because there's very little psychotherapy brought in, very little shadow work. So that's sitting there, and that codependency is what needs to be flushed into the open.
For sure. Yeah. When I was a meditator, I had a teacher that ultimately ended up sleeping with a student, and it sort of shattered my projections, right? And actually, it was the best thing that ever happened in that community, at least for me, because I didn't see how stuck I was in the dynamic, right? In that kind of codependent dynamic you were talking about.
Yeah.
It woke me up.
It's a great arena for work. I mean, it's just right up there with sexuality. If you look at it deeply,
Oh,
you
yeah.
get so much of what makes you tick.
Totally. In working with students, you train people, you lead groups,
Yeah.
you train people for years. Can you talk about a moment or tell a story where you got a little stuck in that role, or thinking you were hot shit or special or something?
Some of them run together for me, and they're ones where I could feel some investment in a certain outcome. That was years ago, and I became more and more aware of it. For example, I'm working with a couple, and they really are messed up, and maybe he or she, that one's treating the other one really badly. And I'm working with it, and I feel an aversion. I don't let the aversion show very much, but I'm in there, and I can feel my investment in a certain outcome. And what I've learned is to let go of that, so that I can see more and more clearly. So if I have an investment, the couple should be together or not, I don't let that enter into it. Because I've seen too many people where actually they've had a breakthrough and suddenly they're together and it's working, or they need to part. And my job is to help them part in a way that's really compassionate and as unmessy as possible.
And what did you do to work with your aversion? You sounds like you became aware of it, but that's the kind of thing that a therapist, let's say, needs to go get supervision around, right?
Mine was pretty minor, but it was there. So I would tell Diane about it, and I would look at myself and work with that.
Yeah.
So now when I do groups, I can feel maybe it's the echo of a little bit of attachment to something happening, being there, but I don't let it get in the way. I always deliberately and tune into my own compassion for that person. What's best for them, not what's best for me.
Yeah, totally.
And that's been a long, gradual process, getting more and more skillful with it.
Yeah, I remember going to grad school, and it was 30 hours were required to become a therapist as a client. Like I needed 30 hours as a client, and I was so psyched because I was ready finally to look at my shit.
Mm.
And it set the template for me to be a good practitioner. I've got to always be not only getting supervision, mentorship, guidance, but also keep working my own material, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Be willing to do the uncomfortable, look at our own shadow. What are we keeping in there we want to keep out of sight?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. What is it? Where is it? And how can I reveal it in a way that,
Or even in a piece of work where someone's having, you can tell they can have a bigger opening breakthrough if they push just a little harder, but it feels a little unnatural to push them. So I've learned just to always back off. Then I like to describe the territory more so they have a sense of more agency as they step through the gates.
yeah,
Maybe I pushed them a little bit there. It was appropriate. So they got near that edge, but I know they needed to cross that new territory themselves. I'll be right there with them. But if I lead them by the hand through that part of it, I'm letting them down. Whereas earlier, my job was to give them a hand, to help them feel the sense of safety they needed to take that jump, or to face the group and say something, do something with the group that works.
totally.
And back off as soon as it starts to feel like it's getting a little bit too much of this, too much of that. So, I mean, my way of working is very intuitive, and it's always based on being led by what I'm receiving moment to moment. So if I give you a sentence to finish, you finish it. I'm not going to have another one in mind. I'm going to my response to you is going to come completely out of my sense of you and your energy, and it's inherently self-correcting. Like if it doesn't quite work, change the tone.
Something, right?
Yeah, that there's that fine tuning. I think as we mature in our work with others, we have to get more and more capable of fine tuning ourselves, so we can read all the signals. Then we have to make the appropriate shift, choice. The whole thing sounds very complex, but it's actually quite simple.
Well, how do you teach intuition to your therapists and coaches? Like, because that comes with experience, but is that teachable? Do you actually teach people that?
Yeah. I teach it, but not like I'm giving notes in front of the class. It's more like they're watching me work with something that's very difficult, and they're watching me kind of find a way through seemingly difficult, impossible situations with a client. And then we unpack it after, and I'll say, here's how I went from A to B, B to C. What did you notice?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll start to feel their own radar kicking in. So then they too will not to work exactly like me, but to feel the spirit in which I work, intuitive, integral, compassionate, to feel that and say, now, where would you go here? It doesn't have to be exactly like me, but there's a sense of trusting that intuition rather than having a preset program in mind for that person.
Yeah, I'm hearing that you don't actually lecture about intuition, you demonstrate.
Yeah, same with the work. And I've had people years ago, I tried to teach it step by step, and people kept saying, we want to just watch you work, then we can talk about it, look at it, then practice.
And that's still, in your experience, is the most effective way to teach people?
It is for me. It is for me, because the thing is, no one's going to be able to do body work the way I do. It's very unusual. So I teach very little of that now, except in a very basic way.
Yep.
But the gestalt, the encounters, the spirit, bringing spirituality into it, there's certain things that I can do, but they're not pre-programmed.
Yeah.
Like I often in a group, I'll do something I've never done before. There's that happens quite frequently. And it's not because I'm doing it, it's because that's intuitively I'm pulled there, and I have a little more increased maturity as I've to go there with a person. Or if someone's really bored or upset, hurting, I have more ability than ever to go into that state with them. So someone freezes up during couples work, I like to go inside the frozen up state with them. So we take it away from the realm of shame and say, what's here? Mm-hmm. What did happen? What's your history with it? Here's something you can do. But the goal isn't to get them out of the freeze, it's to have them get to witness it more skillfully.
Yeah.
So it's like the opposite of spiritual bypass, because you're turning toward what's difficult and painful. And because you're in there with them doing it, not shaming or pushing them to get through this seemingly negative state, they stop pathologizing it.
Right.
That's because not of what I say, it's because of what I do.
Yeah, and how you are. You're being, right?
So it's like back to scrolling there, you and I, our work is to be absolutely present for those who are working with us and committed to being clean as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so curious how I have a lot of questions coming at me at once. What do you think the most important part of the healing journey is for a person in their life when you're talking about working one-on-one or in a group context? Like what is really the work about? What are we?
I think the work really in a very simple way is to turn toward what's we normally would turn away from, and to be guided into that in a way that's non-shaming, compassionate, and very skillful. So if you're in some degree of pain, you want to pull away from it, I'm going to be inviting you to move toward it just a little bit, not too much. That will,
Sure.
and if I don't step into you at all, I leave you hanging. And most people find when they step toward it a little bit, there's such liberation. It's like, now I can see my fear up close. I can sense its texture, its color, and I'm not afraid of the fear now. I'm just simply curious about it.
Yeah. Okay. And let's say I do that. I'm now starting to get curious. What does that do for me though in my life? Like, why bother turning toward my discomfort?
Because so much of you is trapped in there. So if you don't do that, you're not as full of being. You're partial. You're divided. You're fragmented.
Yeah.
You're not whole. You're whole to some degree, but you're not really whole. And I think you've seen too. I mean, people are happiest when they feel really whole. They could be having a miserable life situation, and they could still be having a bad day. Well, they could still be making good use of a really shitty situation because they feel whole in it.
Yeah, totally. It's not a problem.
No.
Why is the developmental work, I want to come back to this, so important, the developmental task, the Erickson stages or whoever stages we want to, Wilbur stages, whatever. Like, why does the developmental work so important, including and especially with spiritual practitioners who are trying to get to maybe a state without doing the developmental work? Can you talk about why kind of growing ourselves up is so essential?
Yeah, well, the tendency is to, out of personal ambition for all the goodies that could be there, to skip a stage or to presume one is further level of development going, you know what, I don't want to go back and do that stuff.
Yeah.
But maybe I need to go back and revisit my adolescence to get more in touch with what emerged then, or when I was a child. I mean, it's tempting to skip those and just want to, go to the stage that's supposed to be close to the big E, enlightenment. And it's quite seductive.
Totally. Yeah, I was on that path.
I think every stage in a healthy human includes and is intimate with the earlier stages. So like I feel very intimate with the boy in me, the baby, the teen. Not just like, that's done. I'm finished with that. No, it still arises. I can tell when I regress. It's there.
Nice.
And we just coexist. I mean, you got to know the stages. You got to be intimate with them. You can't be intimate with something if you don't get close to it. You don't move closer to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can a person sort of grow themselves up without being intimate with those stages?
I don't think so. I think you could have lopsided development. You could have someone who's got an incredible intellect and is an emotional midget.
Yeah. Super small, right?
Yeah.
A very underdeveloped. Yeah. I mean, we see that in spirituality all the time, right? It's like levels and lines, right? In Wilber's work. They're very developed spiritually, but underdeveloped in another line called relational development, let's say.
Yeah, and to me, that can't be done if you don't know your shadow well. That's why I think shadow work is probably the most essential work we can do. Real shadow work. You go into that dark cave and you go in there to explore, discover, become intimate with. And the reward is, is more and more you have, more and more of yourself.
Yeah.
You're not just aware there may be some violence in you somewhere. You know your violent tendencies. You know the roots of it. And because of that, you're less likely than ever to act it out. But you still recognize it's there, and that gives you more compassion when working with someone who still hasn't done that and is in the grip of that.
Hey, every month I'm going to be doing a challenge. You've probably heard about it if you've been listening. You've got to be on my email list, however, to get in on the action. And you could win, a relationship course. You could win potentially coaching with me, no charge. You could win coaching with one of our coaches. There's lots of cool stuff that you can win if you play. How do you do that? All you have to do is be on my email list and look for the email that says personal update. In that email, I share a lot of personal wins and losses, highs and lows, podcasts I'm listening to, books I'm reading, favorite song, anything I'm watching, and what my challenges are, what my opportunities are, and of course, the challenge. So just go to relationshipschool.com/challenge, and you are going to be asked to just leave your email address. Okay, and then you're on my email list. Boom, done. And just make sure it doesn't go to spam. All right? relationshipschool.com/challenge.
Spiritual teachers. Why do so many people continue to go to spiritual teachers? And you could say subordinate their authority to the spiritual teacher. Other people, maybe not. Maybe it's a different kind of quality. Like, are we humans still doing that? Are we sort of putting the spiritual teacher on a pedestal? They're buying into it, and we're in a dynamic. Is there any spiritual dynamic that's okay?
Spiritual teachers, charismatic personal growth to teach. I mean, it still happens. It's a shortcut, I think, for a lot of people. Like how they get plugged in with this particular person or teaching, then they have a way out of their suffering. You don't have to suffer as much because the answers are being handled by this group or this teacher.
Mm.
They give away their authority, and there's a payoff. And the payoff is what has to be explored. What am I getting out of? Just like with sex, many people are obsessed with sex because it carries the promise of a kind of an escape from our suffering. And the work there is, how do we release our sexuality from the obligation to make us feel better or more secure or more together? We can do the same with spirituality. Like, this is going to bring me out of my suffering, help me get away from it. Again, more avoidance.
Is there any spiritual, I guess, community going on in the world right now, in your judgment, that is not doing that, that's doing it differently, that's somehow doing it in a better way?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I think because the very dynamic of, say, if you're sitting there as my guru, the very dynamic is inherently problematic.
Yeah.
Unless we're both incredibly mature, which is unlikely. So, I mean, are you a disciple?
Am I a disciple of like someone?
Yeah.
No.
No. But you are devoted to your path.
Oh, absolutely.
You're devoted to what makes you work. You're devoted to your relationship, things you do that help you deepen, the way you're teaching. So you've taken on an increased autonomy.
Yeah.
And then you become the teacher, but you don't have to be the kind of teacher that you would have given your power away to before.
Totally. Yeah. I try to undercut that frequently with my humanity, right?
I do think the age of the guru is falling somewhat.
What makes you say that?
Because I've seen it. There's more and more disillusionment, more and more teachers caught with pants and halos down. I mean, there's an awakening. And it's still very sobering. Like, I consider the Republican Party to be a massive cult.
Right.
I mean, wow, all these people are bought into this for all kinds of reasons. It's not just the weirdos that join cults. It's like all kinds of people get involved in cultic setups. To me, codependency is a cult of two. There's a tacit agreement not to rock the boat, just the two of us.
Right. I'll do my role, you do your role.
Yeah, the ego's a cult of one. I mean, it's very common. I mean, the Trumpism is still on the rise a little bit.
For sure. That's why I love partnership as a path. And you've written about that before, that it's harder to hide in a family or with our partner. Can you say something about that?
I agree 100%. I think it's wonderful. I mean, and I think more people aren't following it because it sounds good on paper, but to live it is not.
It's that hot you were talking about.
Yeah. No matter how, like, Diane and I have an incredibly harmonious deep bond, but we're in it. We're in the deep end of it, and it's we're going to our death together. I mean, she's my last partner.
Yeah,
I'm hers, and there's a sense of being so surrendered to that, and I have no plan B, nor does she, or plan C. So if she dies or something horrible happens to her, I'll be completely devastated. But if I wasn't this close, I wouldn't get as much out of being with her. So and to me, it's my path, intimacy as a
me too.
Relational intimacy. I think you are too in that place, and that's a wonderful place to be. I can't imagine doing anything else. I certainly did other ways when I was younger, but this works. Yeah, you got to apply to it. And many people want it to work for them, but they aren't mature enough for it, or else they're so different from each other they can't make it work.
Totally. Yeah. And then both parties, or one or both parties, is usually doesn't have this view that it's really about growth and developing yourself and growing up and learning how to love someone. It's not, they think it's the fantasy.
One outgrows the other. One of you outgrows the other, mainly because the other one is maybe not working as deeply. They're just trying to ride the energy you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a path. I mean, it's a recent one too, because the first book on it mattered to me was Stephen Levine's book with his wife, Embracing the Beloved.
Yeah.
Wellwood less, but somewhat. And there's, it's still uncommon. I mean, I hear so many people wishing they had a partner, and I can see what they're doing to just making that not happen.
Yeah.
Mostly being involved with someone they're not quite lined up with, and hoping that will someday change. And in the meantime, they're not turned toward one who could truly meet them.
Yeah, or they'll choose the unavailable partner conveniently so that they don't have to open their heart.
Yeah, or they're having a relationship with the other one's potential. Long. I'm sure you've seen lots of that.
Man, why do we do that, right? It's like so many people, it seems like they choose partners that won't meet them because they don't know any better, because their childhood experience in relationship was this is as good as it gets.
Well, they didn't choose the partner. Their conditioning did. They identify with their conditioning. The conditioning picks the partner. There's a charge with the old situation.
Yeah.
They eroticize it and say, man, they're in it.
Yeah, that's great. It seems like what I just heard you say is conditioning picks the partner. Well, that still could be a good partnership, but then I have to choose it, right? I can't let my conditioning just sort of...
You have to recognize your conditioning for what it is, because your conditioning is going to make a certain pick. Like you can meet a new person, your conditioning has a certain take on them, whereas the deeper Jayson has a different take. So you want to differentiate that.
Mm-hmm.
In simple terms, I'll say to someone, what would the child in you say about this person you're describing to me? And what do you say? And these are quite different.
Yeah.
The child may want to cling to this person because it's so familiar, even if it's toxic, it's familiar. Whereas the mature adult in them can go, you know what? Wow, looks nice, smells nice, but I don't trust the situation. I don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Why? Can you say something about the quote law of attraction? Because I'm sure you've seen in your work that we draw in, it seems like to me, in my experience, we do attract or draw in a certain person into our lives that's uniquely kind of capable somehow of helping us grow exactly where we need to grow.
I think a lot of that implies more agency on the person's part than is actually the case. Often it's more automatic. It's like it's magnetic. It's
like
strong,
a magnet, yeah.
But it's not chosen. It's already in place. That conditioning has not been examined deeply enough, so it runs the show. And at that point, we're not even aware of our choice-making mechanisms internally. So it's kind of automatic.
So the work is to get into choice?
The work is to see your conditioning for what it is. And you can't just do that intellectually. You have to do it emotionally, viscerally, psychologically, and know it well. So when it's showing up, you can say, here it is. Like if you're being reactive and I walk in the room, I'm probably going to see, here's some of Jayson's shadow material surfacing.
Yeah.
And he's talking as though he's a rational, clear adult, but his wife and I can both see that he's
it's full of shit.
The same applies to me. It's like, okay, here we are. I think we know we're automatic when we work on ourselves.
Were you in my home yesterday or something? Or
it's leaking through.
That's great. Well, okay, so I chose my wife. In a way, it's like we started dating, and I somehow found myself with a woman who would mimic sort of certain behaviors of my mother. And I mean, there's no accident there, right?
Yeah.
How do you explain that in sort of spiritual terms that aren't bypassy?
That she showed the similar qualities your mother had, and there were qualities that pulled you in a certain way, attracted you, bound you, perhaps. Yeah. So there's that. Now, if she was only that, I don't think you'd be with her now.
Definitely not.
But she was more than that. She had some of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's not the only thing that attracted you.
Yeah. Correct.
You're working on yourself at the time you met her.
Yep.
So you had some awareness of your dynamics.
What's that?
You had some awareness of your dynamics at that time, right?
A little bit. I was pretty new to personal growth. This was, almost 20 years ago, 18 years.
Yeah. You just froze for a sec.
Yeah, I got you back. Okay. You were saying something about her history. I knew her history, or I know her history now. Yes.
Yeah. So you can tell when her history is kicking in, say she's having a hard time or she's getting a little reactive.
Yeah.
You're sure she can do that for you.
Yep. Totally.
What in you chose her besides the fact that some of her behaviors mimicked your mother? Was there something deeper?
Oh yeah. I was immediately drawn to her maturity, her capacity to self-reflect, her womanly way she carried herself in her body, how embodied she was. There was many, many things.
Yeah. Did it have an ease to it?
Yeah, it had an ease, but it also was confronting. The way I describe it, Robert, was I was used to dating sort of girls, and she was the first woman I met. Mm. And it was intimidating, honestly. It was a little scary and uncomfortable for me.
She was a peer then.
Yeah. Yeah, but I didn't have some top-down sort of dynamic with her.
Yeah, the peer stuff is so important. I mean,
Yeah.
I met Diane. We did not meet romantically. We met. It was a music project we were going to work on together. She found my poetry online a long time ago.
Oh yeah, you told this story actually on the podcast.
Yeah, and so, but we were peers right away. And after a couple of meetings on the phone, I could tell, and she was not impressed by me at all, which I really, I like. She liked it. It was a relief. Oh, you've written some books. Okay, so now what? So we've always had that peer relationship. I assume you and your partner have had that.
Totally. Yeah, eye level.
Without that, it'd be very difficult. You would end up, if you're older, a little more mature, you'd end up being the teacher. She might grow incredibly, but you would not have as full a bond.
Yeah, that's right. And not one of us is not the sort of teacher and one of us the student. I mean, we're both kind of students of each other. You could say that in a fun way, but yeah, equals.
Yeah.
Yeah, friends,
Yeah.
super tight friends. Yeah. How important is the shared values of personal growth, do you think, in a partnership?
Yeah. And she's probably your best friend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's my go-to person when anything's going down, high or low.
And even though that's for you true, for me true, it's not that obvious from a lot of couples. It just isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So how do we avoid spiritual bypassing? We do our shadow work. We surround ourselves, I'm guessing you would say, teachers, mentors, guides, peers, friends who are willing to call us out, call us forward, help us with our blind spots. What else would you say?
I think at the core of it is a very deep commitment to not avoiding anything.
I like that.
And to de-glamorize your spiritual yearnings. You could have a profound experience spiritually, say in a dream or whatever, or have a profound experience from a drug, but to look through it, not to go, okay, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Not to limit God to a particular activity or feeling, but say there's a mystery implicit in all this. Is like Diane and I, part of our work together spiritually is we're become more and more intimate with the mystery.
Mm.
Not just of Diane and Robert, but of the mystery of being here.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. I mean, and the mystery gets deeper and deeper for me as I get older. It's not like, okay, I've got to figure it out. I'm at the point now where I'm bowing to that.
Yeah.
Including my own death. I've come close to death a number of times. So I have a special interest in having my intimacy with that in place way before I physically die.
Yeah.
And we share that. So that makes it richer.
Yeah. You had I think a heart attack, didn't you? That was that one of your death experiences?
That's one of them. Yeah. Diane says I've used up my 9 lives. She's seen
Yeah, and you're still standing.
Risk of giant waves, almost drowning and stuff. But the heart attack, it hit me. I knew I had 5 minutes left and I'd be gone. The pain was agonized and I was starting to black out. And Diane, thank God, she ran in the house, got some baby aspirin, crushed them, put them in my mouth, had me swallow them, called 911, and the ambulance was there in 5 minutes. 40 minutes later, they'd already got me to the hospital and put a stent in, cleared the artery that was blocked. And I was in bliss. There was a lot of pain, but I was so happy to be here.
Oh.
And after that, I said, this is all bonus time. This is for me now. It's bonus time. I get to be here because nothing could have saved me other than having that operation and having it that quickly.
Wow.
It was so quick. It wasn't like one where you ride in pain for an hour. I was going. My job was to stay conscious till the ambulance got there, which is really hard.
Wow.
And the image before me is me trying to say goodbye to Diane. I'd be blacking out. I couldn't see her. She's terrified. And that was really heavy.
Oh.
But wow. So now I got a stent here. Got prostate cancer. It seems like that's very quiet. I'm not going near big waves anymore.
Do you mean that as a way to say that I try not to scare myself more, or what do you mean?
No, I've always been drawn to water, going deep water, going underwater, holding my breath a long time. I really love that, but I've come close at least 4 times or so to that being swept out. And poor Diane would watch me. I thought this is torture for her. It's also foolish on my part. Maybe in my 50s I could risk it more, but in my 70s, what am I doing?
Yeah. Maturity, huh?
Yeah,
You got wiser.
I think a really deep bond brings us more in touch with her mortality too.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
the more you appreciate her, the more devastating it is to even consider, what if she did not exist anymore? What here I am.
Well,
Not
that
just
was my,
replace her. What do I do?
right. That was my question. I just coming back to me now, thanks to your comment there. Dependency.
Yeah.
Right. It's something so vulnerable to depend on someone. Would you use that word? I depend on.
Healthy dependency. I mean, I think it's healthy.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And I need this need. It's not needy. It's need, raw need, air,
Yeah.
oxygen, love, connection. And I've grown more through being with Diane than anything else I've done. I've done a lot of psychotherapy, a lot of experiences with drugs, etc. But the deepest growth has been through being with her.
Mm-hmm.
It's also been the easiest time in my life being with a woman. So I recommend it highly to everyone I work with in appropriate fashion.
I'm so with you.
Yeah.
Drugs. That was my other question. You're reminding me of all these questions. Psychedelics. Is there a way that people with a resurgence of psychedelics and psychotherapy that are using psychedelics as a way to bypass?
Yes.
How?
Yes. We have a church in Ashland, ayahuasca church.
Yeah.
I mean, it's legal. And I've seen people take it hundreds and hundreds of times, but the relationship is still the same. They haven't shifted.
Yeah.
Like I had one major ayahuasca trip in '93, blew me to bits, and it shifted me. I didn't need it again.
Right.
The gates blew open. That was it. Okay, now I see what's here. I'm incredibly glad I did it.
Yeah, I did it dozens of times, and the reason I stopped was because I wasn't integrating anything from the experiences.
Yeah, you integrated probably at any point you weren't integrating?
I mean, very, very little. I would get high. I would sort of come out with all these great, amazing ideas.
It's hard to integrate when you don't feel it. To feel it, you have to actually be on it.
Yeah.
Like this drug I took after ayahuasca almost killed me. It's called the 5-methoxy-DMT. I stopped breathing twice for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. I turned purple. I was completely unconscious. I was somewhere else fully conscious, and I could not get out of it. It's like a lucid dream you can't escape. The people around me were like freaking out. I didn't know this, pounding in my chest, CPR. And I came out of it. I thought, wow, I feel so good. And they said, you almost died. You almost died. And it took me 9 months to recover because I had such trauma from it, from not breathing, and my nervous system. It was like this jittery, shaky.
Yeah.
Changed my life. But I mean, that was me having a drug other people I knew had taken. It was no big deal to them. It nearly killed me.
Yeah.
Like I have a client who's had a bad trip on weed, and they're in agony. Someone else could be injecting 5-MeO, taking ayahuasca, and doing all OGA, whatever it is, and they're fine. Mm-hmm. So I said that was my last time.
Nice. One thing I will say ayahuasca did for me was it helped me be with my fear more successfully.
You got scared on it sometimes, I assume.
Oh yeah, terror, just the darkest of the dark places, and I was able to stay with it.
Terror.
What's that?
I had to sit in the terror for 3 hours in ayahuasca, terror and awe. Then when I had the 5-methoxy, I had to spend the next 9 months sitting with the terror because the terror was horrible.
Yeah.
Until I felt compassion for me who was absolutely terrified and just sat pouring sweat night after night.
Yeah.
Not knowing if it would ever end.
Oh man. Yeah, that's hard. Right. Whew. Well, Robert, as we wind down, what other just final thoughts you have for the listener who might be a spiritual practitioner or a person that's into personal growth and development?
I'd say study spiritual bypassing clearly, identify any parts of it you might be engaged in, and slowly but compassionately disengage, explore it. And if possible, turn toward your pain whenever it arises. Just turn toward it.
Amen. Yeah. And I ask a question now on the podcast to all the guests. One of our missions is to reach a lot of young people to help them be more relationally competent, work through their differences, work through conflict. And if I had a room full of 1,000 high schoolers and you were whispering in my ear and I could only tell them one thing about love or relationships, what would you want me to tell them?
Have compassion for all that you are, proceeded, of course, with an explanation: what is compassion, what is empathy, what does it mean to turn towards difficult? Because we can't turn to what's difficult or painful if we don't have some compassion for ourselves. If I'm cursing my stubbed toe for throbbing, I'm unlikely to have it heal fast. Or if I turn toward it, the pain inside, breathe deeply, it's probably going to heal a little faster. Because all of this requires compassion.
Yeah.
And courage. And I think my bias here is the greatest place to practice this is an intimate relationship. You get chances every day. Every day.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, it's been awesome. Thanks again for putting your heart and art out in the world with so many books and poems and just the work you do. Where can people find you and your books and your material?
robertmasters.com.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, and I'm working on Zoom. Zoom's going great. I'm surprised how well the Zoom groups are going and trainings. It's like, wow, this is as good as in person. I don't know if you found that, but
Oh, yeah, it's been amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And everyone in the room can watch me work up close to someone, not in a circle where they kind of get blocked by each other's heads and stuff. They're all looking at the screen. And here I am with a particular guy or woman and working with them.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, Jayson, good seeing you.
Yeah, great seeing you, man. We'll put this out soon, and I'll let you know and your team know, and say hi to Diane.
I will.
Action step. What's up? Go to robertmasters.com. Check him out, guys. Check out his books. He does a lot of cool work in the world. I think one of my key takeaways with this episode was the willingness to be messy in my relationship and work through it. And I believe my wife and I do a pretty good job of that. And I want you in the next 24 hours, if you're willing, to tell perhaps a messy truth or an uncomfortable truth, or be uncomfortable saying something with someone you care a lot about. Could be a partner, a family member, or a close friend. Because it's the wrestling with difficult conversations that has you become more relationally mature and I think ultimately spiritually developed as a human being. So that's my challenge for you today. Can you do that in the next 24 hours and share what you learned or what happened with a close friend, which might be someone else that, does or does not listen to this podcast. So share an uncomfortable truth or something uncomfortable or vulnerable about yourself with another person as a way to foster greater intimacy and depth. And it's possibly conflictual information, or it could be a hard conversation, a hard, crunchy thing. It doesn't really matter. Be willing to turn toward that and not avoid it anymore. And just push yourself to do it in the next 24 hours and then share. Cool? Awesome. And thanks, as always, for subscribing, on your phone. That's very easy to do. For leaving us a review, sharing with your friends. And I just feel grateful. And if you want to take a deeper dive with me, certainly you can go to relationshipschool.com/training. Sometimes there's a page there that shows when the latest training is coming up. And you can ask me a live question. I'm very responsive on Instagram. If you follow me there, that's another good spot, @Jayson Gaddis. Okay. Excellent. And make sure to pre-order my new book on Amazon. It's called Getting to Zero: How to Work Through Conflict in Your High-Stakes Relationships. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Be well. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.